In life's journey, we must seek to reflect, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Road to Rediscovery with your host, Aubrey Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them and to take it to the next level and help others who are struggling through dark times. My special guest is an educational consultant, author, trainer, and collaborator. With over 2 decades of leadership roles, he's laser focused on building collaborative partnerships on any level for continuous improvement. His book, Let's Put the C in PLC, a practical guide for school leaders, covers the skills, tools, and more for collaborations that get results. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Chad Dumas to the show. Hey, Chad, how are you? Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be able to engage with you.
Oh, no, absolutely. You're welcome. Likewise, we're glad that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and just give us a glimpse into who Chad is and the great work that Chad's doing. So let me go ahead and just kind of start off here. Um, and this is my first question. In many cases, it's usually in our younger formative years when we discover a passion or a dream that we want to pursue. I mean, in adulthood, I can remember people asking me, when did you like talking to people or public speaking or anything like that? Well, yeah, when I was a kid, I used to put the I don't know, the wooden spoon, in front of my mouth and pretend it's a mic. So with a lot of this dreams that we want to pursue and passions that we find out or discover in our formative years, was this the case for you in education and developing? Um, and if not, what inspired you to move in this direction?
Yeah, for me, my life's journey has been really a lot of, you could say, happy accidents
Hmm.
that, guided me along a path that if somebody would have said to me 20 or 30 years ago that, Chad, you'd be where you are, I would have, never thought that this is where I would be.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so early on, probably like a lot of young boys my
Hmm.
age, first, second grade, I wanted to be a firefighter and a police
Yeah.
officer, and did all the junior firefighter things and all those types of things.
Uh-huh.
And then I went through a stage of wanting to be a scientist because I
Mm.
really loved science. I still love science,
Yeah, yeah.
and actually, very interestingly, fifth grade, went down to our elementary school and was playing basketball by myself, just shooting hoops in the elementary, basketball hoop.
Right.
And some guy was also there. I don't know, he might have been 30 years old or something.
Hmm.
Maybe he was 15, but I was, 11 years old. So he
Right.
seemed really old.
Yeah.
Anyway, we started playing basketball together. I still to
Hmm.
this day have no clue who this guy was,
Yeah.
and had a conversation about what we wanted to be. And
Hmm.
I said I wanted to be a scientist. And
Hmm.
he said, "Oh, are you good at math?" I'm like, well, yeah. And he said, "Well, you got to get really good at math to be a scientist. You got to do
Mm.
a lot of math, like really high level math."
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
quite frankly, it scared me.
Mm.
Even though I was good at math,
Hmm.
it made me question whether or not I wanted to be a scientist.
I
And
see.
interestingly, so the reason why I share that is
Yeah.
the power that our language has on other people, even
Hmm.
when we don't realize it. Total
Hmm.
stranger, never met him before, never
Right.
met him since.
Hmm. Hmm.
Planted seeds of doubt in my mind as a 10, 11 year old. And
Hmm.
that shifted my career thinking from there on.
Hmm. Hmm.
So then, I struggled. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a musician. I played the piano,
Hmm.
played saxophone at that time. A few years
Hmm.
later, picked up the trumpet and then the baritone horn. And in high
Hmm.
school,
Hmm.
had amazing teachers that I really loved, including the band director.
Hmm.
And when I graduated from high school, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I knew I wanted to serve humanity,
Yes.
and took a gap year. This was mid 90s. This was before a lot of people did gap years, right? Now,
Yes,
now,
yes,
now they call it gap year.
they do. That's right. 100%.
then,
Yep.
then it was like, huh, you're doing what? You're taking a year off, and
Right.
will the university hold your scholarships? Yeah, they do. It was all okay. But anyway, I went and
Yeah.
served in Israel
Oh, wow.
for a year
Hmm.
at the World Center for the Baha'i Faith, and I was a gardener in Haifa.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
this was a really mind-changing experience for me. Not only the physical aspects and the spiritual aspects, but just the mindset aspects,
Yeah. Yeah.
where I was serving with people from 80 different countries.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my roommates were from Ireland and Cameroon and Canada, and
Mm.
then later on from Bolivia and Costa Rica and
Hmm.
Canada, another Canadian,
Yeah.
just from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I had this experience that really shaped then the rest of my life,
Hmm.
where his name was Marco Verhagen, and he's Northern European. I think he's Danish, if I remember correct, or
Okay.
Belgian. And he trained me in the gardens. And we
Hmm.
somehow got on this conversation about how many continents are there. And, all your listeners who are American will know that in second grade, we're taught that there are 7 continents.
That's right.
I mean, this is a
I
fact.
remember. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
remember, okay, there's
Yeah.
7 continents, 5 oceans, right? I mean, this is
Uh-huh.
just a basic fact. And somehow Marco and I got onto this conversation, and he said, "What? No, there's 5 continents."
Hmm.
And so then this was like so he and I, bantered back and forth and had this
Sure.
friendly conversation discussion, and
Yeah.
then decided, I'm here with people from 80 different countries. I'm going to ask what other people think. How many continents are there?
Sure.
So it turns out that everywhere in the world, except for the United States, students are taught that there's 5 continents.
Mm.
In the US, we're taught that there's 7.
Yes, that's right.
Now the Canadians,
Wow.
they would look at me and say, "Oh, you're American. That means there's 7." Like the
7.
Canadians must be
Right.
taught both or something. I don't know,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
and so this like really changed my thinking. Like something as basic as what we're taught when we're 7 years old
Hmm.
as a fact isn't really a fact.
Mm.
Changed my perspective, and it made me realize that if I hold up a beach ball
Hmm.
and you say it's yellow and I
Hmm.
say it's red and somebody else says it's blue, we're all right.
Yeah.
We just have different perspectives.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
By the way, you're probably wondering, and the listeners are wondering, well, what are the 5 continents then? Right?
Yeah.
And
What are they? Yeah.
so, America, they count North and South America as one continent.
America.
So,
Okay.
America,
All right.
Europe,
Hmm.
Africa, Asia, Australasia, and then they don't count Antarctica.
I see.
So, we count Antarctica
Ah,
and we
yes.
separate North and South America.
Amazing. Amazing.
So anyway, just this idea of the importance of seeing other people's perspectives.
Well, yeah, yeah. And in working in, you said Israel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in during that gap year, doing something as productive and as as eye-opening
Mhm.
as working abroad and working with people from different countries and everything, that just opened the door to
Yes.
all sorts of possibilities and new perspectives for you
Yeah.
that going to university the following year would not have given you in that length of the same length of time, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely amazing, and the way you mentioned how in the states, yes, they teach us 7 continents and not 5. I don't know. I kind of and I have friends in Canada where we kind of just lightly rib each other a little bit, and we and they say it's funny how like in the states everyone else goes by kilometers, and in the states you're going by miles.
Hmm. Yeah,
Everyone does meters, and here
yeah,
you are doing feet.
yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. So that really, both experiences that you shared with us here, Chad, um, it's very eye-opening, right? I mean, you had an early introduction to the impact that words can have
Hmm.
on someone's direction, someone's desire, and then um, you know you had another introduction on the difference of perspectives later in
Right.
life, right?
Yeah.
So, um, what lessons from both of those have you been able to reflect and apply to the work you do today? If I can just ask that, and then I'd love to unpack your leadership philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of that first experience and the power of words,
Hmm.
um, that's just that continues to resonate with me and the impact that our words have,
Hmm.
especially those of us who are in quote unquote positions of power.
Yeah.
Um, and even if we don't realize we're in a position of power, if
Hmm.
I'm a
Hmm.
classroom teacher, I'm in a position of power over that class. If I'm a
Right.
principal, I'm in a position of power over the school. If I'm a
Right.
police officer, I'm in a position of power. If I'm a superintendent, like, just go through a laundry list of all different positions of power,
Yes.
perceived or real.
Right. Right.
There's impact, and
Yes.
so understanding that our words have impact and
Hmm.
trying to speak with words. I love the phrase "as mild as milk."
As mild as milk.
Yeah, you think of milk. The old
Yeah.
adage.
Yeah.
Before going to bed, you have a warm cup of a glass of
That's
milk.
that's right. That's
Why?
right.
Because it's mild. It
Yeah.
calms things down. Now, not if you're lactose intolerant, but
Right.
you know,
Right. Different story there.
but this idea that how can we approach our engagement with other human beings
Right. Yeah.
with a wisdom, if you will, to the
Hmm.
language that we use with other people.
Hmm. Hmm.
In terms of the second experience and thinking about perspectives,
Hmm.
um, it has influenced me in the need to seek out other perspectives
Yes. Okay.
and
Gotcha.
to have a humble approach, if you will,
Hmm.
to my own thinking, a humble posture of learning, to realize that I don't know it all.
Hmm.
I can't know it all.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have a tiny little sliver of the puzzle, and you have a sliver, and somebody else has a sliver, and somebody else,
Right.
and together, by engaging in collective inquiry into each other's thinking and
Right.
reality,
Yeah.
then we can come to truth, and
Gotcha.
recognize ways that we can move forward better.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like in the second example where you learn
Mhm.
perspective, it also help manifests curiosity, to be
Yes.
curious, to have a curious mind, where genuinely and authentically seek out those different perspectives that you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Very
Gotcha.
much so. Your ability to paraphrase is really masterful. Seeking out from others.
Yes. Yes.
Curiosity is a great way to describe that.
Oh, fantastic. Beautiful. All right. So, Chad, I'd like to now slightly shift and let's just
Sure.
talk about your educational philosophy, okay, and your
Hmm.
philosophy on leadership.
Hmm.
If you can just share for the enlightenment of the listeners, your philosophy, your model, and what what's the basis or the foundation on the work that you do.
Yes. So, as you might surmise, that experience in Israel really influences my leadership style, my leadership beliefs, my leadership
Yes.
values.
Yes.
And that is that no one person can have all the answers,
Hmm.
but the answers are in the room.
Hmm.
And so the job of designated leaders, and I use the term designated specifically because everybody has the capacity and the right to work as leaders.
Yes.
The designated leaders, it's their obligation to elicit that thinking,
Hmm.
to elicit those perspectives,
Hmm.
to build a common vision together,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then to galvanize that vision into collective commitments and actions that we take as a collective
Okay.
to move forward.
Hmm.
And in doing that, we also identify metrics,
Hmm.
and then we bring the data back to see if we're actually making progress
Hmm.
towards that vision, the goals that we set for ourselves. And so that's the work of the leader. There's a great quote from, I believe her first name is Elizabeth or Liz Weissman, from
Hmm.
the book Multipliers.
Hmm.
It's maybe 6 or 7 years old now, yellow cover, but it's a fantastic book where she looked at what's the two different types of leaders: those that are diminishers, is what she calls them, and
Hmm.
those that are multipliers.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she makes this statement in the book that I think is really, really powerful. She says that leaders begin with with a simple assumption and a single point purpose, and that is that the other people that you're working with are good, are knowledgeable, are there to do the right work.
Mm.
Like
Hmm.
that's the if you're a leader, that's got to be your single purpose
Right.
and a basic assumption.
Yes.
And so with that, then we can move together, move forward together. Now,
Gotcha.
there's lots of skills that go with that. It's not just a matter of having the assumption, but that's the
No, no,
starting
no.
point.
There's a lot behind it. Yeah, yeah. No, I understand. I understand. I appreciate you sharing that insight, Chad. I really do, and kind of I don't know, kind of like to dovetail onto that question
Mhm.
with I'm really eager for you to share with the listeners your thoughts on the generational evolution of leadership. Okay, now I think we're around the same age, maybe. I've seen in my childhood, you know, back in the 70s, there was one style of leadership. And
Mhm.
maybe
Yeah.
it's a little different for me because both my parents were in the military.
Uh-huh.
So, and my father was literally a drill sergeant. That was his job, and not a nickname. It was his job in the army. And then he started recruiting. Anyhow, he was of the generation of being a baby boomer, that there's a certain type of leadership. The leadership, it involves instilling a little bit of fear.
Mhm.
It involves respect. It involves there's a chain of command. I make the order, you follow the order, no
Mhm.
questions asked,
Right.
and that sort of thing, right? And then as we become adults, at least in the circles in which I interact with different people and groups and companies, um, you hear a lot about what they call servant leadership, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And the role of a leader, and it's not just someone with a title, but someone who has the ability to influence, someone
Right.
who practices humility, someone that brings out the best in the people in their team and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So over the years, there's been a shift in
Mhm.
what were considered the norms, norm characteristics, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
of a leader. What are your thoughts on that? Question one, and
Mhm.
question two. Um, it sounds like your model supports the latter.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of like generational leadership,
Hmm.
yeah, there may definitely be something to that. Although I've read some things recently that kind of debunked that a little bit.
Okay.
That you can find both types of leadership in all generations. Um,
Ah. Okay.
and
Yeah.
for instance, I was able to work for an amazing superintendent.
Hmm.
Give him a shout out here, Craig Couts in Hastings. He's solidly a baby boomer,
Hmm.
and was one of the most distributed leadership, servant leadership oriented people I've ever met.
Hmm.
And then I've also worked for another superintendent. I won't call them out because they
Sure.
were they did not embody that. They
Oh.
embodied more of the drill sergeant, but they were not a
Okay.
boomer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't know. Those are my experiences anyway. I don't
Yeah.
know if that actually bears out in the research. But
Gotcha.
in terms of this idea of servant, what's effective leadership?
Right.
What you were talking about there with the qualities of effective leadership, it made me think of immediately Jim Collins' work
Mm-hmm.
from early 2000s
Hmm.
that has continued to be relevant to this day, where he, for those who aren't familiar with his work, he identified the top performing Fortune 500 companies over the last 30 or 40 years.
Gotcha.
And then he looked at those and said, what was common about those that consistently outperform the market?
Hmm.
And there were
Hmm.
companies like Coca-Cola, Walgreens, I don't remember whatever else.
Hmm. Hmm.
There were, I think, 40 companies. And
Hmm.
what he narrowed down was common amongst all those companies. What he termed level 5 leaders.
Gotcha.
And level 5 leaders, that was a term he contrived, but it
Hmm.
had level 5 leaders have two main characteristics
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
them. One is an intense professional will,
Hmm.
strong professional will. Like they are passionate about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and anybody else, knows that that's why they're doing it. And
Yes.
and you and I and everybody else knows people who have this strong professional will, whether it's professionally or in their
Hmm.
church or in their community organization or whatever. Like they have this strong passion for doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second characteristic that all of these level 5 leaders had
Hmm.
was intense personal humility.
Mm. Nice. Nice.
They have this unique combination of both of those,
Yeah.
both the strong professional will
Hmm.
and intense personal humility.
Mm.
And that's what raises leadership to a whole new level.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I too don't have the research either from the data regarding the evolution or anything, but I don't know. At least from my experience, that's kind of like what I've witnessed as a kid growing
Uh-huh.
up versus the leadership that that we're doing in our corporate market, corporate
Hmm.
work, job force,
Yeah. Yeah.
environment, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but we do know that those are two styles, right?
Yes, that's
And
true. This is true.
yeah, so there are two styles, and the one common denominator, though, which to me is the one consistent beauty of either style leadership, is there's no denying that it takes a team. There's no
Hmm.
denying that it takes
Hmm.
collaboration. There's no
Hmm.
denying that it takes partnerships to
Yeah.
move the ball, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
To achieve the objective, right? And so you talk a lot in your book, as well as workshops that you've conduct for collaboration, right? For
Hmm.
continuous improvement and so forth.
Hmm.
Can you just share with us some principles that you talk with in your workshops, that you speak to, that helps drive people in the direction of effective collaborations and partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of things that are
Hmm.
critical to effective collaboration.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my mind went to a variety of things here that I could share about, briefly on this episode. One of the things that my mind goes to is a study from Google, the Google Corporation,
Hmm.
from I think it was 2016 or 2017,
Okay.
and they studied team effectiveness in their organization. So these are teams in Google who
Yeah.
are, tasked with doing whatever Google does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they studied, I think, 180 different teams to find out what made for teams that were effective and those that were ineffective.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they went in with some hypotheses, as most people would on a study, right? So
Sure.
they thought, well, maybe some teams are effective because they have proximity with each other, like they're in
Hmm.
the same part of the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're able to, shout over each other's cubicle and
Hmm.
maybe that's something that makes a difference.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe it's the degrees that certain
Hmm.
people that have higher levels of degree that they're able to collaborate better.
Yeah.
Maybe it's their expertise in it.
Hmm.
Like if they're on a team where they have high levels of expertise and you're on a team that you don't have that expertise, maybe you're not as effective. Maybe it's that certain teams they have better tasting brownies when they get together on Friday
Hmm.
morning. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Think of all the reasons why a team might be effective and what are they? So they studied this, and what they came out with is that none of those were what were truly impactful for effectiveness.
Hmm.
What they found was the teams that were effective had what they called a psychological safety.
Really.
And that psychological safety was broken down into two areas.
Okay.
That in order to create psychological safety, you have to have number one, um, social sensitivity,
Yes.
and number two, equity of turn taking.
Mm, hmm.
So
Hmm.
these two ideas are really important in our work of helping teams become better collaborators. So social sensitivity. How do we help people better read each other's nonverbal cues?
Right.
Voice tone, body language,
Yes.
head movements,
Yep. Nonverbals.
physical, all these things that are,
Hmm.
the communication scientists say that, what 50 to 90 some percent of communication is the meaning of communication is through nonverbals.
Yes.
So we need to help people with that
Hmm.
if we want them to be effective. And
Hmm.
and I know, and everybody knows that we've been with people that they just cannot read a room for the life of themselves, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
so we need to help them. We need to help each
Hmm.
other and raise that degree of social sensitivity. So, if Jamie is unhappy in the meeting,
Hmm.
then somebody else in the room says, so Jamie, I've noticed kind of a shift here. Maybe you're disagreeing with the content here. Can you share with us some of the things you're thinking about right now?
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So developing those skills in the team to recognize and then
Hmm.
respond appropriately through
Yes.
paraphrasing, through pausing, through posing questions.
Hmm.
These are skills that can be developed.
Active
That's social
listening, all that good
sensitivity.
stuff. Right.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So that's social sensitivity.
Hmm.
And then the other area that creates psychological safety is in the area of equity of turn taking. And again, think of groups that you're part of. The
Hmm.
groups that are effective have one or two people who do all the talking.
Yes. Either that or they're talking over each other. Right.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. And
Yeah.
nobody's listening to each other. And then
Right.
you also have one or two people who just sit silent and they don't say
Y-
anything ever.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You don't have equity of turn taking. So
Mm.
what is important with equity of turn taking then is the use of protocols. So step-by-step procedures to help us ensure that we have equity of turn taking.
Right.
Through those two simple things, I mean, they're simple, they're not easy, but they're
Right.
simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Organizations can go a long way in helping to improve the effectiveness of their collaboration.
Right. Right. These are some amazing tools, man. I mean, and they're things that are right in front of our nose,
Uh-huh,
that you mentioned, social sensitivity.
uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, it's right there. I know exactly what that means. And then once you realize how obvious it is, and like you said, they're not easy to attain
Hmm.
or achieve, okay, but they're simple
Yes,
concepts,
right.
and so and these are amazing tools, that you help in teams becoming more effective in their collaboration, because um, I would imagine you would agree, effective collaboration saves time, you
Oh,
know
yes. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, when it comes to
yeah,
delivering objectives, delivering results. You have a
yes.
team that is very cohesive, that collaborates, that has that equity of turn taking,
Yep,
in speaking and
yep,
so forth. Things get done quicker and there's
yeah,
less ambiguity, I would believe.
yeah, yeah. If you're not saving time, that may be a red flag that we're
Yes.
not effective and we need to be thinking about this. I
Gotcha.
like to share with people that what we want to do with
Hmm.
our groups and our team meetings is we
Hmm.
want to get three things. We
Hmm.
want to get the most done
Right.
in the least amount of time
Yes.
with the greatest group member satisfaction,
Awesome.
right? I mean, we want
Yes.
to feel good about it. We want to feel
Yep.
good about each other, and
Yeah,
we,
everyone wants
we want
wants to feel good about it. Yeah.
exactly. So that's
Yeah.
that's the goal: the most done in the least
Hmm.
amount of time with the greatest group member satisfaction.
Nice. Love it. So, what type of pivots did you have to do, Chad, in the past year when it came to coaching um, leaders in the educational space or the leadership development space, with the pandemic and the rise of the pandemic? And I'm not just talking about how you conduct your workshops and the modality of delivering your
Hmm.
workshops
Hmm.
as a pivot,
Hmm.
but as a pivot to what they need to do to be effective with their teams.
Hmm. Yeah. Boy, that's a multi-layered question there.
Yeah, I
Let
know.
me let me see what I can do. So the last year and a half, since before the pandemic hit, actually has been one giant pivot for me,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
professionally and personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a school system. I was in the Ames Community School District as the
Mm-hmm.
executive director of elementary education. And before the pandemic hit, I came to the conclusion that I would no longer be in that role as of July
Okay.
1st, 2020.
Okay.
And so before the pandemic hit, I actually resigned from that position and knew that there was two paths open to me. One was to be a superintendent of schools,
Mm-hmm.
and the other was to jump in full time as a consultant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd been
Mm-hmm.
dabbling with that for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and made the decision I was going to jump in full time as a consultant.
Mm.
And so the pivoting happened really with that, with writing a couple of
Oh,
books,
I see. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
with building a website, with reaching out to schools and districts, with doing work through Cognia, which is the international leading accrediting organization in the world for
Yes.
schools, with doing some adjunct faculty work at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, with a whole bunch of things, in my personal and professional life.
Right.
And then in terms of working with schools and districts and coaching, the modality all, as you said, completely changed to online.
Right.
I think for me, one of the biggest pivots has been, a lot of my work has been in PLC work in
Mm-hmm.
general.
Mm-hmm.
PLC, by the way, stands for Professional Learning Community. It's
Gotcha.
educational jargon. We like to use a lot of jargon, but
Yeah.
professional learning community. So that's PLC.
Gotcha.
Um, so that was kind of my general area of
Mm-hmm.
expertise that I've been doing a lot in, and I
Mm-hmm.
really honed in on how do we help build productive teams?
Mm-hmm.
How do we access everybody's expertise?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make sure that meetings are effective? And doing this all, whether it's remote or face to face,
Mm-hmm.
and first and foremost, ensuring that all of that work is leading to equitable outcomes for kids.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And I think that's one thing that the pandemic has highlighted for
Mm-hmm.
us in
Mm-hmm.
schools. It's always been there. There's been inequities, and we've
Yeah.
known they exist.
Yeah.
What the pandemic has done is taken this really bright, I don't know, 10,000-watt spotlight and just, like a magnifying glass, just shined the
Yes.
the bright light of the
Yes.
inequities, and not just the pandemic, but then we also had, the killing of countless,
Yes.
unarmed Black men and women,
Yeah. Social
but the
injustice and everything. Yeah.
social justice issues and George
Yeah.
Floyd in
Yeah.
particular, like, seemed to be a tipping point. That all
Yeah.
of a sudden, not only do we have the pandemic, but then we also have a greater awareness of social justice issues,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, we can't. If we were burying our heads in the sand before, we got to get them out of the
Yes.
sand. And if
Yes.
we had our heads out of the sand, we got to make sure that our priority number one is making sure that we're ensuring equitable outcomes for every kid, regardless of race, ethnicity, background, zip code, whatever different,
Mm-hmm.
um, what some would say predeterminers of student performance are. They're not predeterminers, they're
No.
just context. And we have to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that every kid gets what they need.
Yeah, those predeterminers, or as they refer to them as predeterminers, that I don't know. In some cases, that can be like an easy cop out.
It absolutely is.
When it comes to trying to explain why a certain demographic has this average score versus another demographic,
Right.
right?
A
Yeah.
good friend of mine, Ken Williams, he does a lot of work in the PLC work, consultant
Hmm.
in that area. He says those things that we're talking about,
Hmm.
race, ethnicity, background, neighborhood,
Hmm.
etc. These are context,
Hmm.
but they're not excuses.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I completely agree. And man, so one thing I picked up from what you just shared, Chad, is that, you know, in the pivot, and due to the simple fact that um, the pandemic has bubbled up an issue of inequities that was there all along.
Mhm.
It was just accentuated, right?
Yeah.
Um, it I love how you said what your focus was on. Okay. for just raising the bar and having the continuous improvement for educating our youth, right? And giving them empowerment and making them feel motivated and giving them the tools to learn better, right? I mean, as long as that's the focal point, then you know whatever the pivot is going to be, it's going to be the pivot for the better.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I tell you, I mean, you had a double whammy, right? I mean, you were already in the pivot anyway, career wise
Right,
or personally,
right,
right? And
right.
then you had the well, we all had the pandemic, and then we had just case after case after case of the social justice issues, and
Mhm.
riots and protests that break out and everything. I mean, man, the only other thing you can add that would make it really tough is an election year. Oh, wait a minute. We had that, didn't we? Yeah. So an election year right in the middle of that. And,
The
uh,
trifecta.
yeah, a trifecta. It was a triple whammy, So, I mean, regardless of what affiliated side you're on, I mean, it's just three very wild dynamics in what
Yes.
I think would be a milestone year, 2020, right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, I'm thinking of 2020 as this is a breakthrough year. At least this is what I thought in January. Breakthrough year, 2020, the numbers itself, 2020 implies focus,
Hmm.
vision, right? And I didn't expect this to happen, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to ask you about the T word when it comes to training leaders and leadership development. The T word I'm referring to, Chad, is turnover. Okay.
Hmm. Yes.
Now, in the corporate work environment, we think of this that word associated with that environment, or a work environment outside of education. But at least those who aren't in education, I mean, my wife, she's retired from Cincinnati Public Schools after 25 years as a teacher and a principal. So, she may have a different take on that. I just never heard the term turnover in the educational circles in the 15 years I was married to her. So I'm just speaking there. I don't want to I don't want to speak for anyone. All right. But anyhow, I understand that educational leaders deal with this problem as well, their staff,
Yes.
their teams,
Yes.
right? So does an effective leadership model address challenges such as these?
Short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay.
Um, my personal belief, and I think the research bears it out.
Hmm.
Well, I haven't done the research, but I would assume the research bears it out. I know
Hmm.
that my anecdotal observations bear it out.
Gotcha.
That turnover is a canary in the coal mine, if you will,
Hmm.
for whether or not you have a healthy or a toxic culture.
Hmm. Hmm.
I heard once, maybe it was about 10 years ago, from some associates from Stephen Covey's organization.
Okay.
They said that people people do not leave their workplace; leave their boss.
Yes. Yes.
And so, if we're having turnover, then we need to look in the mirror
Hmm.
and ask ourselves why we're having that turnover.
Hmm.
I've been in organizations where two-thirds of the staff turned over in the matter of a year.
Mm.
Um, Later on,
Yeah.
fortunately, others in the system
Hmm.
recognized that there was an issue and then made some changes,
Hmm.
and um, that's a good thing. Even as difficult as that change may be,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make that change.
Right.
Um, but if you've got people turning over, um, now there does need to be some turnover.
Sure.
Not everybody, I've heard the term. What's the term? Well, you've got like grade inflation
Yeah.
with students is what they talk about. Well, the same
Hmm.
thing happens with teacher evaluation.
Right.
We kind of got this Lake Wobegon effect, from the Prairie Home Companion, Lake Wobegon, where
Hmm.
all what's the saying? All the men are good looking, and all the girls are above average, and all the men are good looking, or
Yeah.
something like that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, that
Yeah.
that in schools sometimes, just as in other places, there's this inflation, and everybody is doing great.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not everybody is doing great.
It's not the
There are
reality, right?
some teachers, it's a very small minority,
Mm-hmm.
some might say 3 to 5%,
Okay.
are not doing their job. And it's the job of the designated leaders to help them find another path that they'll be more successful in. And I'm not talking about another path in another school necessarily,
Right.
although that can sometimes work.
Yeah.
But some people shouldn't be around kids.
Yeah.
Um, so you might be having 3 to 5%. And maybe you're in a school where you're up to 10 or 15% because maybe there's some issues that need to be dealt with and some culture toxicity there.
There's something you mentioned, which I've heard this quote many times before as well. When people say, it's not the company when someone, leaves. They're not leaving the company. In a lot of cases, they're leaving their manager or their boss, right?
Right.
In fact, we've said that in my circles where I work. My background's in talent development, and about a year and a half ago, I was certified in situational leadership 2 by the Ken Blanchard Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we talk a lot about, those types of things, right? And of course, leadership style is, as you know. So I think that was a very key thing that you shared for the listeners regarding a general reason why a lot of people leave the company, and there is a healthy type of turnover, right? And
Yep.
with succession and that sort of thing. But effective leadership models navigate through that, like you said,
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the role of the leadership is not only building a culture that people want to stay, but it's building a culture where people are attracted to coming there as well. And so we're engaging and actively recruiting others. And in education, unfortunately, we're some of the worst recruiters. Like, we have kids with us for 13 years. You'd think we could be recruiting them to come back and teach for us,
Right,
and we
yeah.
don't. Although I saw a school district nearby here, South Tama Community Schools, where that school district, and so even though your listeners may not be in education, take this idea, share it with your superintendents at the schools that you're with. This superintendent, that school district, and that board make a commitment to all the students who decide to go into education. They give them a letter signed on graduation day that says, if you get your degree in education, we guarantee you an interview when you get your degree.
Yes.
So I think that's a beautiful step, and I think there's other things we could do as well. I started a partnership with a foundation in a school district that I then left, and I don't know if it's gone any further. But I think this idea of local foundations saying to seniors, if you decide to go into education and you come back, we'll get you an interview. If you don't get a job here, or you get a job somebody else, we'll pay you an extra $2,000 a year or whatever to help pay for your student loan, because we know that the salaries in education, the first years in education without an advanced degree are terrible. Once you get a few years and once you get some advanced degree, it becomes okay. But those first few years are rough. So if there's things that we can do, so private organizations, foundations, outside folks, if you all could help with us to help get kids to come back into education. I mean, we know that the teachers teach the next generation, right? They teach the doctors, they teach the lawyers. We need good teachers. So any partnerships that we can come up with to help incentivize, come back and get your teaching degree and then come back and teach with us.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, when districts start something like that, it's one of these, why didn't we think of this sooner, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
exactly.
gosh. Yeah. So with the different workshops that you have, and I believe you have a blog, and obviously your book, right? Your book. Let's put the C in PLC, Professional Learning Community.
Yep.
share some more insights about the book. How long has that book been on the market, and what were some of the things that inspired you in the book from the book?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was published in October of 2020.
Okay.
It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Powell's local bookshops and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what inspired me to write it was my dissertation received international accolades. It was a Best Research Award winner from one organization and a finalist for Best Dissertation in another organization.
Oh, great.
But that was the theoretical part. But then over the course of the next 9 years, in a high poverty, high diversity, and low performing district,
Mm-hmm.
we implemented those ideas.
Gotcha.
And it led to that school district going from being identified as one of a handful of persistently lowest achieving schools in
Mm-hmm.
the state of Nebraska to
Mm-hmm.
having 5 out of the 7 schools recognized as national models, and the other 2 well on their way to becoming national models.
Tremendous.
So I had that knowledge and that experience, and then when I came to Ames, realized that this knowledge and experience isn't so as ubiquitous as what I thought it was. We had created a culture there where it just was what we did.
Yeah.
And so that's when it was like, you know what, I need to write this. Nobody's going to read a dissertation, or a
Right.
lot of people. A lot of people aren't going to read a dissertation, but they will read a book that takes that and translates it into practice. And so there's a little bit of the research on these 10 elements of what it takes to create a collaborative environment.
Right.
And then there's stories, and there's tools, and there's resources and self-assessment checklists to help put it into practice. And while these 10 elements of what you need to know to build a collaborative environment are focused on schools, I've had some success working with some other organizations that have seen very much applicability, like to the healthcare system,
Right.
to nonprofits, to business, and things like that. And I've done just a little bit of consulting in some of those areas as well, and would welcome more, because I think anywhere we can build a collaborative environment, we're going to be more successful, whether that's a school or a business or a nonprofit or whatever.
Yeah, that's the beauty of what you just shared there, right? It could be applied in many different environments, not just in the educational space, but
Right.
but all the other areas that you just spoke of, man.
Yep.
Chad, man, I really appreciate this. How can the listeners connect with you, learn more about the work that you're doing, maybe subscribe to your blog and pick up a copy of the book and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are probably 2 easiest ways. One
Okay.
is through Twitter. At Twitter, my handle is very simple. It's at Chad Dumas, ChadDumas. There's no numbers, there's no underscores or anything like that. I must have gotten on early enough. It's just at Chad Dumas. And on that homepage, when you go there, it'll have links to my website and things like that. And for those who aren't Twitter folks, that's okay. Just, you can still access that if you're not on Twitter. The other way is through my website, and that's nextlearningsolutions.com. nextlearningsolutions.com. And there's a contact link there. There's a link to my blog, which I call Leadership Matters, and which is a play on words, both as a noun and a verb. Leadership Matters.
Yeah.
And then I try not to send out one too often. People get so many things in their email. Between 2 and 3 weeks is when I send something out, although lately it's been closer to 3 weeks, and I think this next one, it's going to be a little over 3 weeks by the time it gets out. So
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic, man. So Next Learning Solutions?
Correct.
All right, nextlearningsolution.com. We'll make sure and have the link to your website, as well as your Twitter handle at Chad Dumas, right? ChadDumas.
Correct.
Okay. We'll have your Twitter social media handle, as well as the website, on the episode show notes for the listeners to directly click to connect and learn more about you, man. Chad,
Thank you.
I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, man. I really appreciate the insights. I appreciate you sharing a glimpse into who you are in the early childhood when you're shooting hoops and and then taking the gap year, quote, gap year, and learning abroad and so forth. And having that experience, man, is just priceless. I think anyone graduating from high school, if they have an opportunity to do something like that, productive and fulfilling in their gap year, that they should do something like that. So,
Yes.
man, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it, Chad.
My pleasure. Thank you so very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So now we're going to go into a segment I like to call Three for the Road. And then Three for the Road, that's where, you ready? Oh,
Let's do it.
He's ready to go. All right, fantastic, Chad. Yeah, we're going to rock this out. And for the listeners' benefit, just a quick reminder, especially if you're new to listening to the show, Three for the Road is where I ask my guests 3 random yet thought-provoking questions that I challenge them to answer in 5 words or less for each question. Now, Chad, I'm going to let you know that none of my questions are cookie cutter. I don't ask the same questions to every guest. My questions are specifically customized for my guests based on their expertise and their background and their field. All right.
All right,
So,
this is going to be fun. Let's see.
All right, so here we go, man.
All
Starting
right.
us off with question 1 for Three for the Road. This one's a fill in the blank, okay?
Okay.
The number one thing you want all leaders to know is?
Can it be 4 words?
Sure.
Don't go it alone.
Don't go it alone. That's right. You got to have that team. You got to have that collaboration and partnership. Don't go it alone. Love it. Love it, Chad. All right. Number 2. The whole time we've been talking, man, for some reason, I love movies, okay? And so I've been thinking about movies, classroom type movies, right? Like Dead Poets Society, I guess, and maybe School of Rock and that sort of thing. Can you name a movie that demonstrates a good example of leadership?
I'm like you, Aubrey. I love movies. And the pandemic's been hard not going to movie theaters. Like before the pandemic, my wife would go to my wife and I would go to 1 or 2 movies every week,
Yeah.
Popcorn or pop, the whole shebang. I don't know. I spent way too much money on movies over the years.
Love the experience.
My problem is I don't remember the titles of them, but that's okay. There is one movie that I've used a clip from in some of my trainings. Actually, you know what? There's 2, but I'm gonna go with the second one instead of the first one.
All right.
There is a scene in the movie Sister Act. Sister Act.
Sister Act. Okay.
Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi. Yep.
This isn't 5 words or less.
That's okay. Roll with it.
But there's a scene early on when they are rehearsing in the choir.
Okay.
And the choir sounds atrocious. They are awful. And Whoopi's like, what in the heck is going on? And she gets up there and she starts unwillingly, at first, one of the director says, well, you think you can do it better? You get up here and do it.
Oh, one of those.
And and so then Whoopi comes up to the front, and there's so many leadership lessons in that little 3-minute clip, from Whoopi praising the previous director to make sure that she wasn't undermining her, to maximizing the strengths of people within the choir. I think she even moves some people around, like they're literally in the wrong seat on the bus, right? They got to get moved around. And gets them singing amazingly by pulling them together and getting them to listen to each other. And so I think there's a lot of leadership lessons in just that one little clip from Sister Act.
Very nice, man. Now you make me want to pull the DVD and go to that scene. It's the first one, right?
I'm pretty sure it's the first one. Yes.
Okay. Cool. No, thank you for sharing that, man. I mean, I'm always looking for good examples of leadership in movies.
Yes.
And teamwork.
Yes.
Okay. So, question number 3 to top us off for Three for the Road.
All right. Third and final. Is this like, wait, don't tell me where I get a prize if I get all 3 right?
No, I'm still trying to build that into my model, man. Hopefully sometime down the line, we'll have something like that, and I'll bring you back on the show.
All right, there we go. There we go.
All right. All right. Topping us off for 3 for the road. Question number 3. What animal or animals do you feel best represent collaboration and partnerships and working together?
What animal or animals best represent collaboration? I guess my mind went to, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but I'll share it anyway. My mind went to dogs.
Dogs. Nice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
that they're
work in
very
packs,
much,
right?
they're
They're packs.
absolutely about packs. And when they're in packs, different leaders take the lead, or if they're part of the human pack,
Mhm.
right? If you go for a walk, they will try to take the lead, or if you as the leader pull them back, then
Mhm.
they'll let you take the lead if they're trained well.
Yes.
But very caring, very loving,
Mhm.
very forgiving.
Yes.
Um, all of
Unconditional.
these, yeah, unconditional love
Yeah.
and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's my mind goes to dogs.
Love it. Love it. I love dogs too. We had 2 over the past, we've had 2 dogs for like 16, 17 years. And
Oh wow,
in 2019, the girl passed away.
I'm
And
sorry.
last year, the boy passed away. But they
Mhm.
had big, huge, fulfilling lives, great
Yeah,
fulfilling lives. And, from vacations to making the move from Cincinnati here to North Texas and all that good stuff. And so I'm just a lover of dogs. My wife and I were on the fence now trying to decide if, we should get one or not, and how much time to go by, but then have
yeah,
someone to watch the dog when we go out of town
yeah.
and stuff like that. So, I know we'll wind up with one. It's just a matter of when, right? Not if, but when.
Win. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Love dogs. Love
they're
dogs.
wonderful.
They are. They are. Chad, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I greatly, greatly appreciate having you here, man. I hope we can stay in touch. And any new initiatives that you have down the line in the next 6 to 8 months or so, love to have you back on the show to get the listeners up to date on what's going on.
Good, fantastic. I love that. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. As a gentle reminder, I want you to save the date. What date is that, you say? July 1st. Save that date. The reason why is because it's the official launch date of the Rediscovery Roadmap online course. All right. If you're on a quest for personal development, this course offers an introspective approach using the 4 cornerstones to personal growth. For more information, just visit roadsrediscovery.com/course. That's road, the number 2, rediscovery.com/course. And finally, if you have a loved one or know of someone who has reached the end of their rope, they seem to be going through so many struggles and challenges and just dark days of despair, and they don't seem to have any way to turn, any direction, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them, because on the road to rediscovery, we want people to know 2 things. Number 1, you're not alone. And number 2, there's always hope. The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life. And it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon.
The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Shark production.